right, everybody out there. Welcome to Metafied Spaces. Today is Thursday, August 14th. It's 4 p.m. Eastern Time in the U.S. here. I'm your co-host, Frank Spicer, CEO and co-founder of Metafied. And with me, we got our trusty mod, Roaming Crypto, over there holding down in Europe. The market is settling in after a run yesterday. BTC touched its all-time high, so that's pretty good. And Ethereum got within $100 of its all-time high, $103 of its all-time high. So we thought a pretty good topic of conversation would be, to discuss, if it looks like there's going to be a resurgence of DeFi as things are sort of stacking up, we should start talking about like who's making money and where is there money to be made in crypto, and is there still money to be made in crypto? Spoiler alert: the answer is yes, but it's probably not in the places that you're used to looking. So we're going to go through a few of that today. But before we get into that, how you doing today, Romy?
Yeah, very, very good. It's been a good day. There's lots of things happening behind the scenes that I'm really excited to have start slipping out through the cracks into the community and into the wider space. And just super pumped really all around. It's great to see some volatility in Bitcoin and keeping us all on our toes. The community's getting very chatty around its take on the markets, and so it's good to be here.
Yeah, and it must be killing you and Yeti right now, sitting there with all the stuff that you guys know and not being able to share it. It's got to be super tempting.
Most moments of most days at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you guys really are sitting on a lot of information that like you can't just say anything just yet, but we're right on the edge, and things are looking pretty good for our community and for our product at large too, especially given this market. I mean, you look at what's going on here, and BTC and Ethereum are sort of pushing up on all-time highs. You got a resurgence in DeFi protocols, and we're actually going to get to a proof point of that in a moment. But there's money to be made, right? Which is, and typically we try to talk about what we think about the overall markets and what we think about how Metafied and the Fied AI project fit in with everything that's going on out there. But not today. Today we're going to talk about other people. And I think the saying goes, right? If you can't talk about other people, who can you talk about, right? That's how it goes, I think, something like that. So let's talk about other projects and what's going on. And there's a few different ways people are making money. I'm going to focus in on the DeFi part first, because obviously, as the market turns, Robinhood, Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, like all those, right? But you might be surprised to know that there's a few different protocols out there in DeFi that are actually raking in a bunch of fees, and they have real businesses built on top of what they're doing, right? And I can cover a few of those, right? I'm sure you're familiar with Lido. Like they have a ETH staking product and a series of products around that. So liquid staking is one way. You have DEXs. So Uniswap is collecting fees. Most of those fees goes to liquidity providers, but Uniswap is going to implement a DAO fee switch, and when that's enacted, it'll route a slice to the protocol or treasury so that you can capture real value off a listing on Uniswap, which is going to change things because the size of Uniswap and it'll make it a competitive place to list. Like that's like if you're not familiar with that, that's one piece of alpha that you should keep in mind. It might be advantageous to list on DeFi. It's not like the DeFi projects are just sitting around letting the central exchanges just run off into the sunset with all the bags. Like I think it's about time we saw something like this where the DeFi side is giving incentives to projects to list on DeFi. So something to think about there for everybody, just as you go forward. There's lending products like Aave, right? Perp dexes like DYDX and GMX. And then MakerDAO has a stable coin to the credit business. And obviously Aave, right? And then one of the biggest, actually probably the biggest that I was able to find from my research is Pancake Swap and also Curve. Like those are making quite a bit of fees. So just before we get any further, you're familiar with all these, right, Roman? And I assume our
Yeah,
community is as well.
I think most of them are, well, I think they'll enjoy learning a lot tonight, but most of them will know what you're talking about.
So the largest the largest earner in the past 30 days is actually Pancake Swap, believe it or not. And if you had to take a stab at what do you think their 30-day revenue is for the protocol? I expect you to be way off, by the way, because I was floored when I saw this number.
30-day revenue for Pancake Swap. At the moment, I don't know, 50 million?
Not that's not too far off. It's actually 34 million for
Okay.
it's like 33.9 million for 30-day protocol, revenue. So, they're inching up on, 400 million in ARR for that product. And it's basically a DEX that's a BNB powered, platform. I mean, that's probably worth $4 or $5 billion in itself, right? Like just with recurring revenues. So, and it's growing. So I'd imagine it's worth considerably more than that. So if you're out there and you're wondering, like, are there revenues generated on that? If you think people aren't wash trading through there, it's probably a little naive. But at the same time, I think there's quite a bit of revenue going on through that platform. So it's worth paying attention to. And then number two, uh, in terms of 30-day protocol revenue, um, actually wasn't that surprising to me. I'll give you a hint for that one. Like, if you had to pick a DeFi protocol that you think might be um, an earner, a real earner, and I'll give you a hint. We've talked about it before. So
Uh, and it's not Uniswap.
it's not Uniswap. Um, no, because Uniswap's not generating fees for Uniswap, so it's not included in this analysis.
Okay. No, you have to enlighten me, Frank.
Okay, all right. I wouldn't like. I don't think I would have got this one either. But it's MakerDAO, which is now Sky, and they're running at about a $14 million 30-day revenue run rate.
Okay.
So, which is pretty wild, and something I really never saw. Um, I never actually understood why stable tokens and things related to stable tokens would earn so much. But when you think about what's the primary problem in DeFi is liquidity, right? Stable liquidity inside of things to make it work. So there's a premium for just matching dollars in and dollars out in what we're doing because there's no FDIC, there's no Fed, there's no liquidity pump into the market. So the thing that's plagued traditional, fiat powered markets is that, like that when something happens, they just inject liquidity into it. But the thing that we don't have the luxury of here is, having liquidity inside a market. So it stands to reason that if you're providing one-to-one liquidity with fiat for conversion, there's actually quite a bit of opportunity there. And once I started thinking about things that way, I started realizing like, oh, you know what? Like if you can make 12, 14% on your just dollars sitting around, it sure does make a lot of sense to find trustworthy places to put them in DeFi instead of sitting in the bank somewhere where they're earning like 0.03% and everybody's high fiving over that nonsense. Like this seems like a much better way to do it. So, um, I think probably what I'm going to do is move more of my, dollars that I don't need right away and put them into to work for me with things like Curve and Sky or MakerDAO and stuff like that because there's a real business around providing liquidity in the space. Um, and then closely related is number three in the space, which is Aave. Aave's a lending product, flash loans. You need something to settle a transaction. There's not enough liquidity there. Obviously, Aave solves a near-term liquidity problem. You can hold the token as a regular holder and enjoy some of the benefits of it. You can stake to enjoy the benefits of the protocol, right? So Aave's at $11 million run rate for 30 days. So that's, I think, one of the, and I think it is one of the things that we should consider in this conversation is, do we think these things are sustainable, right? So I would say Pancake Swap is questionable. I don't know how much of that's real, but I imagine some of it's real. Sky and MakerDAO, I think, is definitely real. And Aave, I think, is a great use case of crypto and Web3 innovating in the space. Like I love the Aave product and project because it actually it shows everybody that we made an innovation that wasn't available in the general market, that wasn't singularly owned by one provider. You sort of crowdsourced a way to provide liquidity in these finite tight windows that power the market. And we literally all got together and through the use of pooling into this made it better, right? So, I don't know what you think of Aave. We've actually never talked about it, roaming, but it's one of
I'm a
those
big
things
fan
when
of
I think about
Aave.
it's super impressive, right?
Yeah, I think Aave is a fantastic project. I've followed it for a long time. I've used it myself a number of times, and I've used various copies of it across different places a number of times. I think it's a fantastic model.
Yeah.
YouTube fan. I've got a question for you though, Frank.
Yeah. What's
This
that?
volatility of crypto at the moment, Bitcoin pushing all-time highs, and a lot of I guess just reflecting back to the bear market, the last proper bear market, where a lot of people had dived into staking in platforms that were giving crazy high returns and that everyone was promising were really safe. What's your take on where the space is these days compared to like 4 or 5 years ago when we were coming out of a crazy bull market, crashing into a bear market, and various protocols were falling over? Do you think we've moved past that point now and into a much more stable place where locking up liquidity, like you said, instead of in banks, moving things into the space is a reasonable move?
That's a complicated question there, Roaming. Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Just throw it at you.
So I'll start off with a caveat, which is being stupid never goes out of style, right? So that's one thing to remember. So do I think we've gotten rid of all the dumb folks? No. As a matter of fact, I think as crypto grows, the overall number of dumb folks in the crypto space grows as well. So just as there's a sucker born every minute, the rate of inflows of suckers increases as the total of people participating in the industry increases. However, I think there's a lot of people that got burned in the last one to realize, oh, if you're promising me a 9,000% APY, you probably have to run out of ways to redeem that sooner or later, unless you're growing at a greater than 9,000% run rate, right? So people can recognize pyramid schemes that have been around for a while. And I think that as an industry, we've come to point them out and discourage them better because I think when you look at what Web3 and crypto was 5 years ago, it was tiny. It was tiny compared to sort of where we are now. And you look at like, before the DeFi summer or whatever we had, you look at that and it was relatively small. So things could move the needle in thousands of percents, right? Like it's one of those things that when you're playing in a small pond, you make big waves and they seem like, it seems like you're making tidal waves, but it's really just, splashing in a puddle. But now, as we've seen the DeFi and and crypto ecosystem tied to the real world, or maybe not. It was the real world, but tied to the existing financial systems. Um, it's easier to see things in sort of comparative context and realize like, oh, this is a small capital market compared to the overall. Like these opportunities aren't available everywhere, and it is my. I'm not dancing around the answer here, but what I'm saying is, I think it's harder to pull off those promises now and not get called out for it. That's point number one. And then point number two, I think that people realize, all right, I might not get a 10,000x, right? And I know there's a lot of like greedy gambler mentality types out there that are trying to find that in the space and trying to flip meme tokens for with no utility and try to just hit a home run. But I think there's a lot of people out there who would be totally willing to take a 2 or 3 month run and do like a 3x or a 4x, right? Like there, and I think those opportunities are out there. And as this grows, picking projects that service the inflows of capital, that service the execution of trades like, you know, MakerDAO or Sky and Aave. And then as the overall DeFi ecosystem grows, I didn't get to Lido, but Lido's at about an 8.23 million uh, monthly revenue run rate. You know, those projects powering the settlement consensus validation of the market. Um, I think there's real value in those things, and they could grow several 100% as the stable tokens get linked up to real world assets, and as people start to fractionalize and tokenize the ownership of real world assets through crypto. I think those products, like if you want to sell 1/100th of a share of a condo or 1/100th of a share of Tesla or something, and those things are tokenized on the back end through Web3 mechanisms, I think it's only going to drive the use case of these flash settlements and small period loans and staking to validate the transactions. Like that infrastructure is a bright future, like as far as I'm concerned. So I think that's all that stuff is still on the table. But what I think we're moving away from is exorbitant, ridiculous APYs just based off of hoping the new people come pouring in and then getting out before anybody realizes that they're not coming in as fast as they were. That's one. And then the other thing is like, you know, it's cool if you're investing in community. I've always knocked meme tokens, but the projects and the communities themselves, I like a lot of people in them, to be honest with you. Like I think they're funny and they're really cool, and I like talking to them. But you can't expect to reasonably pick a project that's going to 500x just based off of, you know, the fact that you got a dog on a token or you got a frog on a token or you got, you know, Trump on a token. Like it's not going to work, right? Like not it's not sustainable, right? So yeah, I think that things that are like matching liquidity and making sure there's enough swapping of liquidity in the market are there, like Curve. By the way, Curve has got a 10 million monthly run rate. DYDX, the Perps Dex, using it to forecast asset prices and be ahead of them, which we know a thing or two about, right? DYDX is almost 20 million in monthly run rate, right? So, um, like all of these things are valuable to the space, and I think that they have futures. And in all of the projects, the only one I'm questioning that I see so far is something like Pancake Swap, and I even think that GMX has a future here. I know that Matt, if Matt was here, he'd Matt's at a conference in New York today, so I'm gonna play devil's advocate for myself. And Matt would jump in and say, "Well, hold up, like you got to make sure that that's real volume and it's not people coming in through uh, you know, other foreign entities and exchanges and just sort of setting the future targets on spot prices that you come jump back out and trade against." But uh, I think that might be a real valuable project there. It's worth digging into, but there's a lot going on here, and we're sort of at the beginning of a new phase of the market where if if you just look at what's going to grow because the market's growing, you can start to make some pretty good decisions about where to get in that's early enough to enjoy the run. And and one thing that I would try to stress to everybody is stop chasing, you know, 1,000 X's at the expense of being able to hit a bunch of 5X's in a row because you can do that right now. Like Wall Street can't do that. You can't 5X in equity on Wall Street. Like you might be able to 5X through options and futures and leverage and stuff like that. But you can literally 5X just by putting your money into something and enjoying the next 3 to 6 months of growth if you pick and choose wisely. And if you do that 3 or 4 times in a row because you learned about the market, understood what's happening, and looked at what happened as Wall Street and the existing financial system grew, and find places that are doing it better and slightly different in this new space here, you can say, well, it worked there, and it worked there because it had a utility. And it works. It's going to work here because it's growing, and they need that utility even more. So those flash loans, staking and validation, liquidity provisions, small windows, like all of those things are only going to have a bigger use case if the market continues to grow, which is a big if, right? The thing that we don't have this cycle is you don't have a government entity that's hostile to the growth and innovation of crypto, which we had last time. We had a mortal enemy in the Biden administration and the SEC that wanted to crush and stamp out crypto. So we're not seen as a bunch of degenerate outcasts that must be stopped at all costs. We're actually being seen as a group of people who are trying to make things better and de-risk markets and make them democratized and open to more people. Instead of being seen as the problem, we're seen as a potential solution. And so not having that hanging over our heads is pretty convenient. Before you had this sword of Damocles hanging over you, and now it's almost like somebody's waiting to give you a high five at the finish. So uh, I don't know. I think we're in a lot better shape. What about you, man? I've just rambled for 7 minutes. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I mean, I'd go back and forth as to whether it's I'm more attuned to the space and so feel like there's less instability. I mean, sure, like you said, there's still idiots buying into stupid things, and there's still people making bad products and stupid things. But I feel like the general hype and the general theme of things around there in terms of the biggest projects and the biggest names being talked about are more realistic, I guess. Also, to your point, like there's not these crazy high returns being promised. It's maybe a little bit less people testing all the crazy possible ideas and people starting to find like that real utility and those real projects behind it. So I think we are in a better place for sure. We're not in a place where it's 100% secure and you don't need to be a little bit aware of what you're doing. But I think we've come a long way in the last 5, 6, 7 years, right?
Yeah, for sure. Although this dawned on me last night too. I saw, FB was in our thing that he's talked about. Like, don't look now, but BTC is just knocking on a new all-time high. And I thought for a second, I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then immediately I started thinking about all the people that have bought in through Bitcoin ETFs and have just recently bought Bitcoin, and all those people that are sitting there that are going to wake up the next time it drops. Literally, I didn't know it would be last night, but when it drops $7,000 in one day, how many people woke up and thought, "Oh my God, I'm going to get wiped out. My life is over." And those of us that have been in crypto for the for a long time are
Welcome
like,
to
"Yeah, man, welcome to the party." Like
yeah.
it's just relax, like
give, give it a week, you'll get used
yeah, like a drop of 3% is life altering on some of those like equities. But when we saw that this morning, I'm sure none of us even thought twice about it. Like, yeah, it'll be back pretty soon. Like that's no big deal. We know where it's going. But that probably scared the hell out of a bunch of new people. So I for everybody that might be listening that's new, I'm not saying you should tolerate it forever, but with the kind of market we're in, you're going to see that kind of thing. And maybe what we can help people start to understand, like, yeah, that happens because it doesn't have a liquidity pump into the market like the Fed or Reserve, which just invents money. It has to actually bring money into the system. Um, Almost, I would say, fairly. It has to bring money to the system in a fair way that demonstrates that people want to buy it. The Fed doesn't decide that it wants to buy it for you. So I think that's one thing worth looking at. But yeah, if that freaked you out, just relax. It's gonna be it's gonna be all right. At least it'll probably be all right. You know, like I'm not gonna guarantee it, but you're probably okay. So um yeah, anything like I'm looking through, the like some of the bigger projects, synthetics, Jito, EtherFi, um, like there's a lot of money out there that is being made, and I would say I wanted to do this episode sooner or later because to prove to people that there are projects that are generating fees that only generate fees when people want to use the platforms, and therefore there are enough people who want to use these platforms that are moving this money around, that there's a usefulness for it. It's got a real market. It's not just a made up thing. Like you hear, like, whenever something is on the ropes, people love to stomp it in the face, right? Like it's like crypto is like that, where you start having people look at you with, side eyes when you're like, oh, you're still involved with crypto and they're still involved with that Bitcoin thing, and you're like, yeah, I have a feeling it's going to be all right, but you remember this time last year, uh, I think BTC was like 58,000, something like that. Let's just take a point to remember. Yeah, it was 58,733 1 year ago today. So it's and people were acting like it was dead, which is also crazy because 2 years before that it was what, like 10,000. No, it was like 5,000. I don't know. It was all right, but it's one of those things where um, the market goes through these periods, but we're in a different kind of market now. Like, we've never had the market hooked up to people making scheduled buys through their retirement plans, or people who are shuffling off some at some intervals on regular intervals to dollar cost average into the market. Like, those things didn't really exist 2 years ago. Like, you had people who had regular scheduled buys through Coinbase, but now you have ETFs and the managers making decisions, and then the people in their portfolios making decisions. And now with the Genius Act, you have stable tokens tied into the infrastructure of things, and you're going to start seeing real world assets fractionalized through what we're doing. So these things start to make a whole lot of sense. And it's worthwhile for everybody to pay attention to them because, of course, we want you to make money with our project, and we want to do big things with everybody. But we also want people to understand that this is a new way of doing things, and there's a bunch of different ways to make it. So we want to see you guys make it, and we want to see you guys be able to, share some of what you learned with us, and let's all do this together. So, anything before we go, Romy?
I think that was a very fun space and great to be part of it. I
Yeah,
learned a lot. I'm gonna probably re-listen to this after this, and yeah, dive back into it.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Curve and Sky and MakerDAO and Aave were really sort of, those numbers were pretty surprising to me. So I'm gonna probably myself probably look to scoop up a bit more of those. So in the meantime, everybody, make sure you're registered for the Surge platform, surge.metafy.io. That's important. Being early is going to definitely help you. Find us on YouTube at Metafied. Find us on Twitter at Fied_AI. And share this with some of your friends because we're creating value and we want to share it with people that are good and in the space for the right reasons. And in the meantime, have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you Tuesday. And in the meantime, take care and be safe. All right, everybody.
Metafight is the only AI-powered Bitcoin prediction game where traders compete in real time to forecast BTC's price in a fast 1 to 5 minute round. Test your skills against global players. Take on 1x risk with the ability to win multiplied payouts and prize pots. The more accurate and early, the better the outcome. Pre-register now for early access to generational wealth.